And we are live. Welcome to Olivia's Stories, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi Reddit, Kenneth here. I always thought I had a pretty good handle on life. A stable job as a software engineer, a comfortable apartment in San Francisco, and a marriage that, while not perfect, seemed solid enough. But I guess life has a way of throwing curvy balls when you least expect it. Let me take you back to how this all began, a day that started like any other, but ended up turning my world upside down. It was a typical foggy morning in the city. Melissa, my wife, had already left for her job at the marketing firm. I was working from home as usual, my day planned out with meetings and code debugging. Our apartment, a quaint space with a view of the bustling streets below, was unusually quiet without her presence. As I was getting ready to dive into my work, I noticed something odd under our bed. It was a small, leather-bound book, partially hidden under the loose floorboard that we always kept meaning to fix, but never got around to. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pulled it out. It was Melissa's diary. Now, I'm not the type to pry into someone's private thoughts, but something about the way it was hidden made me pause. I flipped through the pages, and that's when my world stopped. The diary detailed Melissa's secret meetings, not with clients or friends, but other men. The level of detail was staggering. Descriptions of dates, emotions, even intimate moments. I sat there, the diary in my hands, feeling a mix of disbelief and betrayal wash over me. How long had this been going on? Why would Melissa do this? Our marriage had its ups and downs, sure, but I never suspected she would step outside it. I tried to process it all. The diary entries ranged over several months, and the realization that my wife had been living this double life right under my nose was gut-wrenching. I felt like a fool, the last to know about the reality of my own marriage. I closed the diary, my mind racing with questions. Do I confront her right away? Do I gather more evidence? What do I even say? The trust I had in Melissa, in us, felt shattered. As I sat in our quiet apartment, surrounded by memories of a relationship that now felt like a lie, I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't just let this go. There had to be a confrontation. But first, I needed to figure out how to handle this bombshell. So Reddit, that's where my story begins. The day I found out my wife was cheating on me, and the day my quest for the truth and for what to do about it started. Stay tuned because believe me, it gets even more complicated from here. Hey again Reddit, Kenneth here. After finding Melissa's diary, my world was spinning. I couldn't just sit there with my emotions boiling over. I needed answers, hard evidence. So I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I started my own secret mission, gathering evidence to confront Melissa about her affairs. Here's how that chapter of my life unfolded. In the days following the discovery, I became obsessed with confirming the diary's revelations. I started looking back at the past months, sifting through our shared memories for any signs I might have missed. It was like watching a movie where you already know the plot twist, and suddenly all the subtle hints make sense. I remembered the late-night calls Melissa said were from her office, her sudden interest in new hobbies, and the weekends she spent visiting her parents. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces started falling into place. The inconsistencies were there, hidden in plain sight. Then came the hardest part: gathering more evidence. I felt like a detective in my own home, trying to piece together the reality of my wife's double life. I checked bank statements for unusual expenses, looked for receipts, and even started paying attention to her routine and the way she dressed for work. One evening, I followed her. Yeah, I know how it sounds, but I had to see for myself. I watched from a distance as she met some guy in a cozy downtown restaurant. They were laughing, touching. It was more than just a friendly meetup. That sight, guys, it was like a punch in the gut. My Melissa with someone else. It was real, and it hurt like hell. I also started taking notes, keeping a log of her comings and goings, matching them with the entries in her diary. It was meticulous and emotionally draining work. I felt like a stranger in my own life, spying on my own wife. But with every new piece of evidence, my resolve hardened. I couldn't confront her without being absolutely sure. I couldn't risk her talking her way out of it with excuses. I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't deny or twist. And as much as I was gathering evidence, I was also preparing myself emotionally. Each new discovery was a blow, but it also steeled me for the inevitable confrontation. I was building a case not just against Melissa's actions, but also against the life of lies we had been living. So there I was, Reddit, a regular guy turned amateur detective, uncovering the painful truth of my marriage bit by bit. And let me tell you, nothing prepares you for something like this. But I had to keep going. I needed to see this through for my own sanity. Stay tuned because this rabbit hole goes deeper. And the confrontation, well, let's just say it was anything but ordinary. Hey Reddit, it's Kenneth again. So, where were we? Ah, yes, the aftermath of my newfound career as a detective in my own love story gone wrong. But let me tell you, gathering evidence was just one part of the ordeal. The real battle was happening inside me, a tornado of emotions that I could barely keep in check. Every day felt like walking through a storm. Anger, sadness, betrayal, these words don't even begin to cover what I was feeling. I was angry at Melissa for her deception, sad about the crumbling of our marriage, and felt utterly betrayed by the person I trusted the most. Sleep became a distant memory. I'd lie awake at night, replaying everything in my mind. What did I do wrong? Were there signs I ignored? It was like a never-ending loop of doubt and self-blame. My work started to suffer, and I found myself zoning out, lost in thoughts. That's when I realized I needed to talk to someone. Bottling up wasn't helping. I decided to confide in my closest friend, Mike. He's been my buddy since college, the kind of friend who's more like a brother. I remember that conversation vividly. We met at our usual spot, a small cafe downtown, away from the prying eyes of our regular haunts. The moment I started telling him everything, from the diary to my late-night sleuthing, I could see the shock on his face. "Man, I had no idea," he said, his eyes wide with disbelief. He listened, really listened, as I poured out everything. The anger, the pain, the sense of utter betrayal. Mike was a rock, not interrupting, just letting me vent. After I was done, he leaned back, rubbing his chin, a habit when he's deep in thought. "Ken, this is messed up, but you gotta confront her. You can't live like this, man. But do it smartly. Be calm, collected. Don't let your emotions get the better of you." His words made sense, but it was easier said than done. How do you stay calm when your world is falling apart? Mike suggested I seek professional advice, maybe talk to a counselor or a lawyer before making any moves. "Don't do anything rash. Think this through," he advised. That conversation with Mike was a lifeline. It didn't solve my problems, but it gave me a bit of clarity, a momentary respite from the chaos of my emotions. He was right. I couldn't let my emotions drive my actions. But that was a tall order, especially when every fiber of my being was screaming for some sort of action, some kind of retribution. So there I was, Reddit, caught in the eye of an emotional hurricane, trying to make sense of the senseless. My journey was far from over, and the hardest part was yet to come. Stay tuned, because what happened next was something I never could have prepared for. Hi again, Reddit. Kenneth here. After all the emotional chaos and nights of planning, it was time to face the music. I had to confront Melissa. But how? I needed a plan, a strategy that would leave no room for her to wriggle out of the truth. I wanted her to know that I knew, but more importantly, I needed to see her real reaction, unfiltered and genuine. I decided the best approach was to catch her off guard. I needed the element of surprise on my side to see her raw, unguarded response. It wouldn't be easy. Melissa was sharp, and if she sensed something amiss, she might put up her defenses. I needed to be subtle, yet direct. So I came up with a plan. I'd act normal for a few days, go about our routine as if nothing had changed. This part was tough, Reddit. Acting like everything was okay, talking and laughing with her, all the while knowing what I knew it felt like playing a role in a twisted play. During these days, I paid extra attention to her habits, her schedule. I noticed she'd been a bit distracted lately, probably due to her own guilt. I used this to my advantage. I told her I had to go on a sudden business trip for a couple of days, a believable lie, given my job. But instead of going on a trip, I stayed in the city at a friend's place. The plan was to return home unexpectedly the next evening, when she'd likely be feeling relaxed, thinking she had the apartment to herself. That evening, my heart was pounding as I made my way back to our apartment. The closer I got, the more the suspense built up. It felt like I was stepping into a showdown, the climax of a story that had been building up for far too long. I reached our building, took a deep breath, and walked up to our door. My hand was shaking a bit as I unlocked it. The apartment was quiet. I stepped in, trying to make as little noise as possible. There she was, in the living room, a glass of wine in her hand, completely unaware of my return. She looked up, startled, as I walked in. "Kenneth, what are you doing here? I thought you were." Her voice trailed off as she saw the look on my face. "Surprised to see me?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. The look on her face, Reddit, it was a mix of shock, fear, and something else, guilt maybe. It was hard to read. But one thing was clear, she hadn't expected me, and that's exactly what I wanted. "Kenneth, what's going on? Why are you looking at me like that?" she stammered, setting her wine glass down. "We need to talk, Melissa. It's about time we had a real conversation," I said, my heart racing but my voice calm. And there we were, standing in our living room, the stage set for a confrontation that had been brewing for far too long. The air was thick with tension, and I knew that whatever happened next would change everything. So, Reddit, this was the moment of truth. The moment I'd been preparing for. Stay tuned, because what came next was a conversation I'll never forget.
Hey Reddit, Kenneth here again. The moment had arrived, the confrontation I had been both dreading and eagerly anticipating. My heart was racing as I stood there in our living room facing Melissa. This was it, the moment of truth.
Melissa, we need to talk about your meetings, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. Her eyes widened slightly, a hint of panic flickering across her face. What meetings? I don't know what you're talking about, Kenneth, she replied, her voice a mix of confusion and defensiveness. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, but I knew I had to keep it in check. I'm talking about the meetings you've been having with other men, Melissa, the ones you've written about in your diary. I watched her closely, looking for any sign of her crumbling facade. Her face turned pale. My diary? You read my diary? She gasped, her voice rising. That's private. You had no right. I was ready for this, the deflection, the outrage. I think I had every right when it concerns our marriage, I countered firmly. I found it by accident, but what I read. Melissa, how could you? She started pacing, her hands wringing together. Kenneth, you're misunderstanding things. It's not what you think. They're just fantasies, nothing real. I haven't cheated on you. But I was prepared. Fantasies. Is that why I found receipts for hotels, charges for dinners at places we've never been together? Is that why you've been so distant lately? Her eyes darted around the room, as if looking for an escape. Kenneth, please, you're blowing this out of proportion. I love you. I would never do anything to hurt you. The denials, the gaslighting, it was all there. But I had one more card to play. Melissa, I followed you one evening. I saw you with him. I saw the way you were together. The color drained from her face. There was a long, heavy silence. Then, in a barely audible whisper, she said, You followed me?
Yes, Melissa. I needed to know the truth, and now I do. My voice was calm, but inside, I was a storm of emotions.
The room was thick with tension. Melissa sat down, her posture deflated, the fight gone out of her. Kenneth, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Sorry. The word echoed in my mind. Was it enough? Could it ever be enough? So there we were, Reddit, in the ruins of our marriage, surrounded by the debris of lies and betrayal. The confrontation I had imagined so many times had unfolded, but the feeling of victory I had expected was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was just emptiness, a hollow realization that things would never be the same again. Stay tuned, folks. The story doesn't end here. The aftermath of that confrontation led me down paths I never expected to walk. Hey Reddit, Kenneth back again. After that confrontation, I thought I'd feel a sense of relief, maybe even victory. But all I felt was a crushing weight of reality sinking in. Our marriage, which I had believed to be built on love and trust, was now in shambles. Here's how I dealt with the fallout. In the days following our confrontation, our apartment became a silent battlefield. Melissa and I moved around each other like ghosts, barely speaking. The air was heavy with unspoken words and lingering resentment. She tried to initiate conversations a few times, probably to explain or apologize, but I wasn't ready to hear any of it. My bold and unforgiving nature was at the forefront, leaving no room for her excuses. I spent long hours staring out the window, watching the city move while my own life felt stuck in a standstill. My mind kept replaying the confrontation, her admissions, and the years of deception. Anger and betrayal battled with the remnants of love I still felt. It was a confusing mix of emotions that I struggled to process. During this time, I leaned heavily on my friend Mike. He was my sounding board, letting me vent, offering advice, or sometimes just sitting in silence with me. His support was invaluable. But as the days passed, the practicalities of our situation started to demand attention. We couldn't continue living like this, in a constant state of tension and avoidance. I began to think about separation, the logistics of it, the inevitability of it. It was a tough pill to swallow, the end of a relationship I had invested so much in. One evening, I finally broke the silence. Melissa, we need to talk about what comes next. My voice was steady, but inside, I was anything but calm. We sat down, two people who had once been inseparably in love, now negotiating the terms of our separation. It was surreal, discussing who would move out, how we would divide our things, and what this meant for our future. Melissa seemed resigned, a stark contrast to her usual fiery self. Maybe she too had accepted the reality of our situation. The decision was made. I would stay in the apartment, and she would move out. We agreed to keep things as amicable as possible, for the sake of the years we had shared. But as practical as we tried to be, the emotional undercurrent was hard to ignore. This was more than just a change of living arrangements. It was the end of a chapter in our lives. In the following weeks, Melissa moved her things out. Each item she took felt like a piece of our life together being removed. It was a tangible reminder of the impermanence of relationships, of how quickly things can change. So there I was, Reddit, left in an apartment that once felt like a home, now just a space filled with memories. The fallout from Melissa's betrayal and our confrontation had led me here alone, trying to piece together what to do next. It was a period of reflection, of rebuilding, and most importantly, of healing. Stay with me, folks. The journey isn't over yet. The path to healing and moving forward was a road less traveled, with its own set of twists and turns. After the fallout of the confrontation and dealing with the immediate aftermath, it was time to face the future. The path to resolution was not just about putting legal and logistical pieces in place. It was also about emotional healing and rediscovering who I was without Melissa. First things first, I had to tackle the legal and practical aspects of our separation. It was a tedious and sometimes painful process, dealing with lawyers, diving into the nitty-gritty of who gets what, and signing papers that officially marked the end of our marriage. Each signature felt like closing a chapter, a mix of sadness and relief. I was saying goodbye to a significant part of my life, but I was also opening the door to new possibilities. During this time, I did a lot of reflecting. I thought about my relationship with Melissa, trying to understand where things went wrong. I realized that while her betrayal was the breaking point, there were signs of trouble long before the diary. We had become more like roommates than partners, comfortable, but not truly connected. I had to acknowledge my part in that. But dwelling on the past wasn't going to help me move forward. So I started planning for the future. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects that challenged and engaged me. I reconnected with old friends, went out more, and even picked up new hobbies. I started cycling, something I had always wanted to do, but never got around to. It was liberating, feeling the wind against my face, the road stretching ahead, much like my life. Mike was a constant presence, encouraging me to get out and live. "You're in control now, Ken. Make the most of it," he would say, and he was right. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in the driver's seat of my life. I made decisions based on what I wanted, not what was expected of me or what was comfortable. Through this journey, I learned a lot about myself. I realized that I'm stronger than I thought, capable of overcoming betrayal and heartbreak. I discovered the importance of self-care, of looking after my own emotional and mental well-being. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that it's okay to let go, to move on from things that no longer serve you. So there I was, Reddit, at the end of a long and tumultuous road. The pain of the past was still a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I was moving forward, one step at a time, building a life that was all about me and my choices. Stay tuned for the final update. Hello again, Reddit. Kenneth here for one last update. It's been a journey, hasn't it? From the moment I found Melissa's diary to this point, where I'm typing out what feels like the final chapter of a long, turbulent saga. So let's dive in. The divorce is finalized now. It's strange to say it out loud, I am no longer Melissa's husband. The end of our marriage was a turning point, a definitive closure to a significant part of my life. It was hard, one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was necessary. It marked the end of an era, but also the beginning of something new in my life, on my terms. Reflecting on this entire experience, I've learned a lot. I learned about resilience, the kind that's forged in the fires of betrayal and heartbreak. I discovered strength I never knew I had, the kind that comes from picking yourself up when your world falls apart. And I learned about forgiveness, not necessarily for Melissa, but for myself. Forgiving myself for not seeing the signs, for being a part of a failed marriage. It's been a process, but I'm getting there. As for my hopes for the future, they're brighter than I ever thought possible in the midst of my ordeal. I've started to reimagine my life, exploring possibilities that were once just distant thoughts. I've been traveling more, something I always wanted to do but never got around to. I've visited places I'd only seen in pictures, met new people, experienced different cultures. It's been eye-opening and incredibly liberating. I've also dived back into the dating pool, slowly but surely. I'm not rushing into anything, just enjoying meeting new people and experiencing new connections. I'm more cautious now, more aware of what I want and what I don't want in a relationship. It's a learning curve, but an exciting one. But the most significant change has been within me. I've embraced a new perspective on life, one that values the present, cherishes genuine connections, and looks forward to the future with optimism. I'm more in touch with who I am, what I want in life, and how I want to live it. So, Reddit, here I am. A man who went through one of the toughest times in his life and came out the other side stronger and more self-aware. It wasn't easy, but it was a journey worth taking. I've found closure, I've embraced my new life, and I'm excited about what the future holds. Thank you all for following my story, for your advice and your support. It's been an incredible comfort to share this journey with a community of strangers who became a part of my story. Here's to new beginnings and a future full of possibilities. Signing off, Kenneth.